The sheet danced like it didn't know the weight of things. Wide and white, it snapped softly in the wind, sunlight bleeding through the cotton as if it was stained with mourning. Clara's fingers, rough from years of chalk and grading, gripped the wooden clothespin and released it. The sheet floated down into her arms like it trusted her. She folded it once, then again, pressed it to her chest, and that's when she saw it. A folded letter wedged between her screen door and the frame, the edge trembling as the breeze tried to take it too. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she set the basket of warm linens down on the wicker chair, wiped her palms on her apron, and studied the envelope like it had insulted her. It was from the HOA, of course. Same impersonal print, same urgent tone. They never signed their names, just the board. Clara opened it with the same weariness she used to open student excuses. Notice of violation. Code 4.3b. No laundry or textiles may be visibly displayed from any portion of the property viewable from the street. Penalty $75 fine due within 14 days. Her thumb paused on the crease. She exhaled through her nose. There was no surprise left, just that heavy, low-burning fatigue that comes when you realize some people think manners are louder than malice. She hung her sheets every Tuesday. Same spot, same wooden line. Her grandmother did it. Her mother too. There was something sacred about sun-soaked fabric, something quiet and generational. But Mr. Joel Whitman, HOA president since March, seemed to think it was some kind of neighborhood offense. He didn't wave when he passed, didn't take the peach cobbler she offered in April, didn't return her gardening gloves when she left them near the mailbox. But he did seem to have plenty of time to walk his dog, which always stopped to relieve itself at the edge of her zinnias, and to file reports with the HOA about paint shades and lawn lengths. And now this, a fine, for letting cotton dry, in open air. Clara stood on her porch, letter in one hand, breeze brushing past her cheek like a question. Across the street, Whitman's wife loaded Trader Joe's bags into their SUV. She glanced up, saw Clara, and offered a tight, not-quite smile. Clara didn't return it. She folded the notice into the pocket of her apron and lifted the last towel from the basket, a faded yellow one with her initials stitched in the corner. She folded it slowly, then turned back toward the door and said, just loud enough for herself to hear, "Let them fine me. I've already paid more than they ever will." The next morning, the fine still sat on her kitchen table. Next to it, a chipped blue mug, half full with lukewarm tea. Earl Grey, heavy on the lemon. Clara always left the bag in, liked it stronger than most folks. It was something she picked up from her aunt. Lucille, who swore strength could be steeped. Outside, the neighborhood creaked to life. Sprinklers clicked on. Garage doors groaned open. Children's voices drifted over from the cul-de-sac. Someone had a soccer ball again. And Joel Whitman's dog barked once, sharp and bored, like it resented the leash as much as its owner. Resented Clara. She sat still. There were no tears. Clara had stopped giving them away years ago. Somewhere between her husband's stroke and her own retirement papers, she'd learned to conserve her softness, parcel it out only to those who didn't take it as license. But the fine irritated something deeper. It wasn't the money. $75 couldn't shame her. It was the assumption that she would fold and like the laundry, that she'd say nothing, press her lips into that same tired smile black women were always expected to wear, the one that made other people feel less guilty about what they did with their power. Clara had worn that smile too many times. By noon, she was out back again, retying the laundry line, not to use it, not yet, but to remind herself it was still hers. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Sneakers new, rhythm too fast for leisure. Joel Whitman. "Mrs. Bell," he called out. No good afternoon, no warmth. Just a name, clipped short like he'd been practicing it with irritation. Clara turned, one hand on the line, the other, brushing lint from her sleeve. She waited. "I noticed the laundry line's still up," he said. "Just reminding you of the community standards. You should have gotten the notice." "I did." There was a pause. He expected more. She gave him silence. He cleared his throat. "We've had some complaints, is all. Some of the neighbors feel the clothesline affects the look of the street. Curb appeal, you know." Clara tilted her head. "I suppose it depends whose curb you're trying to appeal to." Joel blinked. "Excuse me?" She didn't answer. Just smiled, small and tired. Then she turned her back to him deliberately and untied the rope with the kind of slowness that felt like a decision. That night, she opened her file cabinet, not the one with old bills or recipes, the locked drawer. Inside was a folder labeled Property Records. Behind that, another one. Vacant Lots, County Land Office. She slipped both onto the table, then gently, the same way she'd once turned, the pages of her students' poetry journals. She began reading through parcel maps. Parcel 207B was directly next to her home, empty, wild, and overlooked. The HOA had fought the city last year over a sidewalk expansion that never got built. The tax dispute hadn't been resolved. Clara smiled to herself. Not smug, not cruel. Just the quiet kind that lives at the edge of knowing. "Let's see how they feel," she murmured, "when the land doesn't answer to them." Clara parked 2 blocks away, not out of fear but out of habit. An old lesson from years of watching what her presence did in spaces not built with her in mind. She walked slowly, shoes sensible, skirt ironed, folders tucked into a canvas, tote bag that had once read "Mum One Teacher" before the ink began to fade. The county assessor's office was quiet that morning. Old tile floors, fluorescent hum. One window open. A clerk with reading glasses and the kind of voice that sounded like she used to sing. Clara waited in line without shifting her weight. When it was her turn, she smiled the way her mother taught. Privacy with her eyes first so they couldn't call it fake. "Good morning," Clara said, laying the parcel number on the counter. "I'm here to inquire about this lot, next door to my home." The clerk glanced at the paper, then typed. A few clicks, a soft, "No bids yet," the woman said. "It's been sitting in limbo since last year. Previous owners went under. HOA tried to claim it as common ground, but the court didn't side with them. They let the taxes lapse." Clara nodded. "And it's available?" The clerk adjusted her glasses. "If you can pay the back taxes and submit a maintenance plan, yes. You'll also need to sign a declaration of independent use. HOA can't restrict development unless they own it outright, which they don't." She slid a form toward Clara. "You'd be surprised how many people don't read the fine print." Clara smiled again. "I never stopped reading." By the end of the week, Clara had a notarized title, a receipt, and a certified letter ready to mail. She paid the taxes, hired a local contractor, an older man named Saul she'd taught algebra to decades ago, to survey the land, ordered a raised garden bed kit, picked up a permit for communal development, checked the law about fencing, and never once said a word to her neighbors. Joel noticed something was different on Saturday. A truck rolled up. No loud engines, no shouting, just quiet laborers setting corner stakes and marking soil. Then a small sign appeared. Future site of Bell Community Garden. Registered with County Green Space Initiative for seniors, teachers, and local growers. Joel blinked, leaned forward on his porch rail, like the words might rearrange themselves if he stared long enough. His wife stepped outside, iced coffee in hand. "They're building something?" He didn't answer. Instead, he marched across the street, paper in hand. A copy of the HOA charter, highlighter marks peeking out from the folded edge. Clara was seated on her porch, trimming dead leaves from a spider plant. "Mrs. Bell," he said, voice tight. I need to speak with you about that lot next door. That's supposed to be communal property. It's listed in our HOA development plan. Clara didn't look up right away. She clipped a leaf, smoothed her skirt. Then, it's not. Never was. I've got the charter, and I have the deed. She stood, walked past him to her mailbox, and pulled out an envelope, opened it, held out a photocopy. Joel read it once, then again, and Clara just watched. Not smug at all, just still, like someone who'd planted something long ago and knew, no matter how hard they tried, these folks wouldn't be able to stop it from blooming. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Same folding chairs, same flimsy tablecloth, same stack of agendas printed in 12-point Times New Roman, like font size could make bad faith sound professional. Clara arrived early, not to be seen, just to watch. They held the meetings in the old rec center near the tennis courts, beige walls, flickering lights, no air conditioning after 6 p.m. It always smelled faintly of chlorine and old sweat, like the room never quite forgot its last argument. She took her seat near the back. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Joel Whitman opened the meeting with his usual tone, that practiced mix of friendliness and enforcement, like a mall cop who once took a seminar on leadership. Let's get started. First item, lot number 207B. There's been unexpected activity, and I'd like to discuss potential violations regarding unauthorized construction and aesthetic disruption to neighborhood cohesion. Murmurs from the room. A few heads turned toward Clara. She didn't blink. Joel continued, flipping a highlighted packet. The structure going up is not in line with our standards. It was not voted on by the board, and, frankly, I have concerns about its long-term impact on property values. An older woman 2 seats over, Mrs. Valenti, raised her hand. Joel, she said gently, the garden. Yes, that's the one. It's not a structure, it's a raised bed and some fencing. Still. And Clara's lived here longer than most of us, Mrs. Valenti added, folding her arms. You ever talk to her before bringing it up here like a crime? Joel flushed. We're not targeting anyone, we're discussing process. Clara finally stood. Not quickly, not dramatically, just with the kind of stillness that draws attention. She walked to the front, placed a folder on the table. I'd like to submit this for the board's record, she said. Deed of ownership, approved permit, county green space grant, and a maintenance plan updated monthly as required by law. Joel didn't move. Clara looked him in the eye. And a statement of independent use, filed with the county, meaning, she paused, voice quiet but unwavering, this land is not under HOA jurisdiction. The room went still. Also, she added, turning slightly to address the room, as of 2 days ago I officially registered the parcel as eligible for voting rights under HOA guidelines. Joel frowned. That's not... Clara cut him off, calmly. It is. Any homeowner with standing property may submit for board candidacy. And I just did. A silence fell. Heavy, but not awkward, just revealing. On her walk home that evening, Clara passed the lot again. The fencing had gone. Fasol's crew had painted it a soft cedar tone, just like she'd asked. 3 elderly neighbors had already donated seed packets. One little girl had asked if she could help plant strawberries. Clara paused. The wind shifted. She thought of her grandmother's hands, the smell of sun-dried cotton, her first year of teaching, the decades between. She didn't smile, but her face softened, like soil tilled just enough to breathe again. By the time Clara opened her mailbox that Saturday morning, she already knew what was inside. She didn't move fast. Just pinched the metal tab, opened it like she had a dozen times before, slow like the act itself deserved patience. 1 envelope, no return address. The paper was stiffer this time, the kind they used when they wanted to sound more official than they were. Subject: Review of HOA Voting Eligibility, Parcel 207B. Your recent submission for board candidacy has prompted a review of your eligibility based on whether Parcel 207B meets the standards of a residential dwelling as outlined in the HOA Charter. We will hold a special vote to determine if voting privileges may be extended to this parcel. HOA Board. She folded it without reading the rest. They were scrambling now, panicking like people do when they realize the rules they made can't protect them from the people they thought they'd written out. Clara walked inside, set the letter on the table, just beneath the corner of her Bible, then poured herself a glass of water. She wasn't angry. She was ready. Later that day, 2 board members walked by her house. Not Joel. He hadn't been seen since the meeting, but 2 of his loyal shadows, Mark Henley and a woman named Sarah, whose husband had once called Clara the good kind of neighbor. They didn't wave, but they did stare. Clara was out front, barefoot in the grass, trimming her lawn with shears. She'd always preferred it that way, kept her connected to the shape of the yard, to the rhythm of care. Sarah said something, under her breath. Mark laughed, and Clara just kept clipping. That night Clara wrote her own letter. Not a complaint, not a defense. A nomination statement, a single page, typed clean. She wrote about her 32 years as a public school teacher, about mentoring students who went on to become engineers, midwives, librarians. She wrote about how she'd joined the neighborhood in '96, back when it was still mostly working class, before the new developments and fresh paint and people who wanted things tidy but not necessarily fair. She wrote about community, not control, and she ended with one sentence, set apart. It's not the rules that keep a place whole, it's who those rules are written for. By morning, the email was sent, the hard copy mailed, and Clara returned to her porch as the sun began its slow rise over her fence, and the first shoots of collard greens broke soil next door. She sipped her tea, felt the warmth settle deep in her chest. The game had changed, but she was still playing. Quiet. Certain, and this time they were the ones out of bounds. The next HOA meeting wasn't publicized the usual way. No community bulletin, no email reminder, just a printed flyer taped crooked on the clubhouse door the morning of, barely legible with small font and intentional vagueness. Special vote, clarification of voting rights, non-residential parcels, closed session. Proxy ballots encouraged. Clara read it at 7:43 a.m. She stood for a while, arms folded, wind lifting the edge of her shawl. They were rushing it, trying to move the pieces before she could see the board, but she'd already moved hers. By 9 a.m., she had hand-delivered letters to 12 homes. Not everyone would open their door, not everyone would care, but a few would, and that was enough. Each letter was simple, courteous, just the facts. I am a neighbor. I have lived here since 1996. I am applying to serve on the HOA board to ensure fairness and transparency for all residents. Some on the board are now attempting to quietly redefine rules to limit voting eligibility based on fear, not policy. If you believe in fairness, I invite you to vote no on the upcoming motion to exclude Parcel 207B. She included a proxy slip, left the return envelope unstamped but hand-addressed. By 2 p.m., 5 had been returned. By 4 p.m., 8. She smiled as she slid them into her leather-bound folder. Joel may have tried to rewrite the game, but Clara had done more than play it. She understood how the rules got made. The meeting that night was quiet. Only 10 people showed up. 3 board members, 2 young couples, 1 mother with a toddler who scribbled on an old agenda sheet. Clara entered with her tote bag, set it gently on the table and waited for them to begin. Joel wasn't there. Mark did most of the talking, fumbling through parliamentary phrasing, citing vague passages from the HOA Charter. Sarah motioned to limit voting rights to residential dwellings with enclosed structures intended for year-round habitation. It sounded official, but Clara stood calmly and read the exact wording from the county statute. Any deeded property within the jurisdictional boundaries of a homeowners association carrying a unique parcel number shall be granted voting rights, unless expressly excluded at formation of charter. Then she looked up. Which this one wasn't, Mark stammered. But it's not a residence. Clara gently placed the envelope of signed proxy votes on the table. 10 homeowners disagree. She leaned in. Just enough. And your own charter only allows a motion to pass with a 2/3 majority of active eligible voters, which we both know you didn't get. Silence. Even the toddler stopped scribbling. Sarah's lips parted as if to object, but nothing came out. Later that night, Clara returned home to a small box left on her porch. No card. No label, just twine tied loosely at the top. Inside were 12 small paper pots. Seedlings. Strawberries, basil, okra, thyme. Each one marked in a different hand. No signatures, just recognition. Clara touched the basil leaf, still damp from misting, and held the box to her chest. No victory speech. No celebration, just roots, growing where no one thought they could. It wasn't long before they found a new angle. The garden was thriving now. Marigolds around the fence, greens pushing towards sun, a small wooden bench someone left anonymously under the oak tree. No one complained about it anymore, so they shifted focus. Clara noticed it on a walk back from the post office. A white sticker slapped crooked onto her mailbox post. Faded text in capital letters. House paint inconsistent with community palette. Ref and 6.2. She blinked. Her house had been the same shade of dusty rose since 2001. It had faded some, sure, but she'd always kept it clean. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It just wasn't their grey. The next day an envelope appeared again, this one typed. To maintain visual cohesion, we are requiring homeowners to repaint any properties that fall outside the current HOA-approved palette. Homes not repainted within 45 days will face incremental fines. No name, just the board. She knew who had pushed it through. Joel, even if his name never appeared, had fingerprints on every sentence. This was no longer about laundry lines or lot boundaries. This was about erasure. A war of tones, not voices but colors, not shouting but sanding down. Clara didn't flinch. Instead, she opened her storage closet and pulled out an old plastic tub marked 1968-1972. Her mother's things. Inside, clippings, church flyers, handwritten notes, and tucked beneath them all, a faded swatch book. The original Freedom House colors, red clay, Carolina blue, indigo, marigold, colors once banned from desirable neighborhoods. Colors, once considered unfit for white eyes. She flipped to the page marked Sunset Earth, a soft rose-brown tone, almost identical to the shade on her home. Underneath, in her mother's cursive, "We use color to say we were here." Clara touched the page like it might warm her fingertips. By Monday, she'd made 3 calls. A civil rights archivist, a city councilwoman she'd once taught in 5th grade, and a local black historian who had just launched an initiative on racially coded zoning. They met at her garden bench 2 days later. The historian held the violation letter like it was evidence. "This is zoning discrimination dressed in HOA language," he said. "We can file an injunction." Clara nodded once. "Let's do it." The lawsuit wasn't loud, it wasn't televised, but it was real. And when the city clerk posted a temporary injunction against enforcement of HOA paint restrictions sign, On the bulletin board, Clara stood beside it with her hands behind her back, watching the wind lift the edge. No announcement. No speech. Just presence. Her neighbors saw it, and slowly, one by one, the street began to soften in color. A deep blue door here, a warm ochre trim there. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to say, we were here too. The chairs were the same. Still metal, still too cold when you first sat down, still arranged in a crooked circle, as if they couldn't decide between confrontation and community. But the air felt different this year. It was the annual HOA meeting, the one where votes were tallied, new board seats confirmed, budgets reviewed, and grievances buried under phrases like "for the good of the community." Clara walked in without hurry, dressed simply, earth tones. She held no papers, brought no speeches, just wore a pin on her collar, a soft pink enamel circle that read, "We were here." Joel wasn't present. Word had spread weeks ago that he'd quietly sold his home and moved across town. No farewell, no thank you. Just a for sale sign that never quite stood up straight. Mark had stepped down. Sarah too. 3 new board members had joined. One Latina mother, a retired nurse, and a widower who spent his mornings painting birds onto reclaimed driftwood. And now, Clara's seat was at the table. Not in the back. Not as an exception. Not in spite of anything, but because she'd stayed. The meeting began. Minutes approved. Motions passed. Near the end, someone brought up the garden. "How do we sustain it?" a man asked. "Clara can't do it alone." Before she could respond, 3 hands went up. "I can help with watering," said Mr. Nguyen from 2 houses down. "My daughter wants to plant tomatoes," said the woman next to him, and a soft voice from the edge added, "I don't know much, but I can build benches, real ones." Clara smiled, small, tired, proud. The kind of smile that doesn't ask for applause. After the meeting, she walked home under a sky slowly bruising into dusk. The house looked warm against the fading blue, her paint untouched, her porch light soft. She stepped off the sidewalk to check the garden. The basil was flowering. The strawberries had spread into the edge beds. Someone had added a painted sign near the gate. "Bell Garden, a place to grow." Clara stood for a long moment. She could still hear her grandmother's voice in the wind, could still feel her mother's hands guiding that first clothesline decades ago, could still remember every time someone mistook her quiet for absence. But she had always been there, not just surviving, rooting. Before heading inside, she stooped and pressed her fingers into the soil, still warm, still rich, still hers, and this time when she stood, she said nothing at all because everything around her was finally speaking for her.